Welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert, author, speaker, and podcast host. You're listening to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. More women than ever are faced with challenging decisions on a regular basis. I am so privileged to sit down with them to discuss exactly what they've gone through and how they've come out the other side, realizing their wildest dreams. I'm sure you'll be able to relate. And don't forget to stay to the end to take advantage of my latest free gift. Let's get started. Hello, you wildly courageous women, you. Welcome to the Wildly Courageous Women podcast. I'm Dana Peever, decision expert. And as always, we're here talking about decisions that have been made in our lives that were courageous or impactful or changed the course of our life, or even one that we wish we could go back on. Each week, I join you twice, once with a guest and once solo. Today, I'll be sharing an impactful decision that I've made in my life. Since I've been studying the science of decision-making for over 30 years, the majority of my life's decisions have been made very intentionally, using my 5-step Decision Smith system and app. I'll walk you through all my thoughts behind the scenes. But before we get started, I want to remind you to stay to the end to get access to my latest freebie. So with this podcast, we're going to take things step by step. I want to set the stage for you as it relates to the decision I can't wait to share with you today. I'm going to tell you the background, what the circumstances were, what my mindset was like, what I went through, if I had a plan, what happened next. We're going to walk through everything so that you can have a good understanding of what it was that I worked through to make this tough decision. So as I was considering which decision I would share to start this podcast series, there were a few that immediately came to mind. I was going to share a podcast's decision that was fairly sensitive in nature, but I decided to save that for a few episodes in. What I wanted to share with you today was a decision that many women are faced with making in their lives if they find themselves in a situation where things like marriage and children are of interest to them. So that's what the decision is today. I'm going to share with you how my husband and I decided how many children we would have. And that was a decision that we made even before we got married. So let me set the background. As you can imagine, we were having discussions as it related to what we envisioned for our lives when we were dating. We had certainly, broached the topic of marriage, but it wasn't something that, we had solidified yet. We needed to make sure that our values lined up and we were looking for the same things in our lives. So originally, when my husband and I first started dating, he was actually never getting married and never having kids. So, that was a hurdle that needed to be overcome if we were going to stay together. And I think he, at that point in his life, had just never found the right person or, wasn't at an age where he had considered settling down previously. So we were in our late 20s, early 30s, late 20s for me, early 30s for him by the time we got married. So, at that point in time, it was something that he was willing to talk about more in depth. So when we talked about kids, we both definitely wanted kids. It was something that we knew we would introduce into our lives if we were able to. And, it was something that we hoped would be, a long-term adventure for us. But when we talked about how many kids we actually wanted, that's where we differed greatly. he wanted two kids. He was pretty adamant that that's how many kids he wanted. I, on the other hand, had grown up with a ton of family around. When I was 10 years old, my one aunt had triplets, my other aunt had twins, and my mom had my sister, all within about 6 months of each other. And I became, babysitter extraordinaire. I always had babies in my arms. I was always changing diapers. I was always feeding, doing whatever it was that the babies needed in terms of tending to. And I had always just imagined myself with an armful of babies. So I remember when we were having that conversation about how many kids we would have. And he said two, and then asked me how many I wanted. And I said six. I think, he went white as a ghost. And it was something that he had never even considered. So, as you do when you're making a decision with another person, um, hopefully you talk about what it is that they are taking into consideration when they look at what it is they are basing their decision on. So, as I said, I had, considered having a lot of kids just because of my experience uh, being raised around a lot of children. He, on the other hand, came from a family with two kids, and that was what he knew. So as we started to talk through the factors, he said a few things that were really impactful to me at the time. He said he only wanted two kids because he always wanted someone to be there, one parent to be there for each of them. So if they had sporting events or school plays or whatever it was, there would always be at least one of us there to attend or be with, each of the children. We would never have a child that wouldn't have a parent available to them. Now, in reality, is that always the case? There's, sometimes a parent working or that kind of thing. But he didn't want to set us up to be behind the eight ball before we even got started. And I respected that. I really felt like that was a good consideration. And I really thought a lot about what a marriage and kids could look like with a family of two children. So a family of four, ultimately. So I went back and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And, as much as I wanted a big family and I wanted the opportunity to have my kids, share in the boisterous life that I'd grown up in. Now, in all fairness, I only grew up with two siblings, but still three of us was pretty rambunctious and loud. And like I said, there were always cousins around. So, thinking about having, two was definitely a step back in my thought process. And that's okay. Because I really wanted to ensure that the decisions we were making at that point in our lives were decisions that would carry us through and not ones that we would potentially resent each other for in the long run or, want to change our minds later on. So after giving it, quite a bit of thought, I went back to him and I said, okay, so do you have any hopes or desires in terms of, the sex of the children? Are you, are you looking at two boys like you grew up with? Would you like a boy and a girl? What is it that you're thinking about? And at that point in time, he really had no druthers on what that would look like. In reality, actually, I always thought that I would have two boys because, that's what he grew up with. And for some reason, when I envisioned our family, then when we looked at having two kids, it was with two boys. So when he asked me if I had any consideration in terms of what I would like to have for kids, you know, I wanted that ultimate family. I wanted a boy and a girl. And I wanted a boy first because I wanted my daughter to have an older brother. And again, these are all things that you can put out there into the universe and hope for. But at the end of the day, we both decided that we simply wanted two healthy children, regardless of their sex, what they brought to the table. At that point in my life, I said to him, I said, okay, I'm willing to have two kids. Can we do this? Because I would really like at least one of each sex. So if we have two children, and we've had a boy and a girl, I'll be happy. That'll be good. But if we wind up having, two boys or two girls, could we reopen the conversation at that point in time? And he agreed to that. Looking back again, we wanted healthy children. We wanted, to be able to raise kids regardless of, what sex they were. But as a young 20 something, I'm being honest, those were the thoughts that were going through my head at the time. So as we progressed and we got married and, we started talking about having kids, that always sat in the back of my mind in terms of what we would have and, if we'd ever need to have that conversation as we move forward. And some of the things that swirled around in my head, brought me back to my own childhood. So I grew up with a brother and a sister, a brother 5 years younger than me and a sister 10 years younger than me. And, back then we had vehicles that were smaller typically than they are today. There wasn't as much room in a back seat for three kids across the back. So I remember all those trips we took a lot of times to visit my grandparents or to go to their cottage, sitting in the back seat with two siblings who were typically not getting along, and just thinking about, having kids who were crowded in a back seat. And again, these thoughts seem rather trivial today, but looking back, it really helped formulate the decision that we ultimately made. The other thing I really recognized as I was going through that thought process is that the world is made for a family of four. And please don't take this the wrong way. I don't want anybody who has less children, more children, no children, a baseball team. I don't want anyone to think that I am judgmental about the decisions that you've made for your life. My entire adult life, I've said to people, I've made decisions that are best for me. You need to go and make decisions that are best for you. So, looking at your background, your history, your family situation, what you liked, what you didn't like, what worked, what didn't work. Those are all very individual factors that you need to look at and take into consideration. So I never want you to get the impression that I'm judging anybody for the decision, anybody else for the decisions that they've made in their lives. So with the two children that we were considering, and the world being made for a family of four, some of the things that ran through my brain took me back again to my childhood when, we'd rent a hotel room and there would be two beds for four people and I got to sleep on the cot. Or if we went to a restaurant, if we, waited for a table of five, that would take, twice, three times as long as waiting for a table of four. And if we did take a table of four, I don't know how many times, I got the chair stuck on the end of the table that, every server tripped over as they went by. You go to the amusement park and roller coasters, many of them have two seats. So, whenever we went to something like that, one person was always left, going on a ride alone or not going at all and watching the stroller full of our things. So all of those little stories were playing over in my head and really having an impact on what I would ultimately choose in terms of the number of kids that I wanted to have. And I feel like at that point in my life, if I was going to have children, if we were able, that I would have an even number of children. And that was just based on a lot of the soul searching that I'd done, not only from my own childhood, but looking at other families and things like that. So fast forward a few years, we, after those conversations around what our values were and what our life could look like, we moved in together. We bought a house together after a year. We got engaged the year after that, married the year after that, built our dream home the year after that, and got pregnant with our first child, actually that same year that we moved into our dream home. My son was ultimately born the following year. So we were off to a good start. I mentioned that I was looking to have a big brother for the daughter that I would hopefully have next. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That son was, phenomenal and great, and having a child was such a gift. And I loved being a mother so much. One of the other decisions that we contemplated, and I know we talked about this before getting married, but a lot once we made the decision to start having kids. And I'm going to step back a minute and just talk about when we decided to have kids. I remember it was my husband's birthday dinner, and we were out for dinner. And I said to him, I said, we need to start thinking about when we'd like to have kids. And he said, we're talking about this on my birthday dinner. And I said, yeah, I figure it's a great, birthday conversation to have. So that night we actually decided that we would, consider initiating the process, if I can put it that way, shortly thereafter. What I'm so thankful to be able to say is that I actually got pregnant on the very first try, which I feel so grateful for and so thankful for. I know there are so many people out there who don't have, that opportunity. And I was really, I think it really solidified my decision that, being a mom was going to be the right thing for me to do next in my life. All right. So baby's born. Again, had a son, healthy baby boy. And the next decision that we needed to, agree on was how far apart we'd have our kids. And that's another big decision, because I, like I say, grew up with a brother who was 5 years younger than me and a sister who was 10 years younger than me. And my sister and I shared a bedroom that was, all I can say is it was horrendous for me, because I was a teenager and she was young, and she would go to bed at, 7 or 7:30, and I would have to, sneak into the bedroom every night, get undressed in the dark, couldn't read before bed. If I did, it was on the couch and not in bed. It was just there's so many things about that relationship that I didn't want to explore with my own kids. So when we looked at, age difference, we landed on wanting them 2 years apart in school. And my son was born in May. And so, fast forward a couple years. And I remember saying to my husband one night, if we're going to have kids 2 years apart in school, we need to get pregnant tonight. And we had a good chuckle. And lo and behold, we got pregnant that night. And my daughter was born in December of that year. So there it was. I had my older son and my younger daughter. They would be 2 years apart in school. And one of the things that, we avoided essentially was having that conversation after two kids if they were, two of the same sex. Because at that point in time, I still, wanted to have one of each. A lot of people know that when I was pregnant, when I was pregnant with my son, we didn't find out what we were having. There were no gender reveals. We didn't know what we were having. But when I got pregnant the first time, I was so sure it was a boy. Like I had no question in my mind it was a boy. And my husband's dad's name is Orvis, and some people called him Elvis as a nickname. So when my first baby was in my belly, he was nicknamed Elvis for the duration of my pregnancy. I'd say Elvis is hungry, or Elvis needs some chocolate, or Elvis needs, gosh, what kinds of cravings did I have with him? With him, it was mashed potatoes and fillet of fish. I think that's what it was. Crazy. And so I think some of the people that I spoke with thought we had checked the sex of our baby ahead of time, because when a baby shower was thrown for me in one of the towns, everybody bought me blue stuff. And I was like, I don't know for sure. It's just my gut instinct. I think I'm having a boy. So when he was born and it was a boy, I was really excited. And remember, I said I always thought I would have two boys just because that's what my husband grew up with. So when I got pregnant for with my second baby, I knew immediately it was a girl. Well, no, I didn't know immediately. I just had a feeling this is a girl. This is a girl. I always thought I'd have a boy, but I feel like this is a girl. And interestingly enough, I carried exactly the same with both of them. They were both basketballs. Like I looked the same, felt the same, carried the same. So there was no difference from that perspective. And so my second was Ellie when she was in my belly. So I had an Elvis and an Ellie. And so when she was born, I think at that point in time, the doctors were pretty used to people already knowing the sex of their kids. So after she was born, he's like, congratulations. And I was like, what is it? And he goes, oh, it's a girl. You didn't know. And I said, no, we didn't know. So, the fact that we had our boy and then our girl, we no longer needed to have that conversation about whether or not we'd have any more, because it was in that moment, once I had those two, that I knew that this was what our family needed to consist of. So a lot went into that, decision. It didn't happen overnight. It was actually probably a 4 or 5 year discussion. And I know that there's lots of decisions that people make in their lives that, do unfold over time. And that's okay, as long as you are looking at the decision not through rose-colored glasses, from various angles. You're looking at different perspectives, especially if you're making a decision in conjunction with someone else. So I'm happy with that decision. I've never gone back and thought about having more kids. It was very clear to me that this is what needed to be. But again, I share this story, or this collection of stories, with the caveat that everybody needs to do what's right for them. And you need to dig deep to figure out what it is that is right for you. And, having those conversations, thinking about, the good and the bad, looking at situations you've seen on the outside, taking all of those things into consideration, that will definitely help you make some great decisions for you as you move forward. So that's my story today with regard to deciding how many kids I wanted when I got married. I really want to thank you for sharing your time with me. And if you're ready to realize your wildest dreams, I implore you, come and join us in the Wildly Courageous Women Facebook group, where we're changing people's lives one brave decision at a time. I'm Dana Peever. Until next time, make great decisions and do life fun. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wildly Courageous Women. Keep listening to hear more stories of these incredible women realizing their wildest dreams. If you have a story to tell about a decision that you've made that has impacted your life, I'd love to feature you as a guest. Please get in touch, and don't forget to grab my latest gift by clicking below. I'm Dana Peever. As always, make great decisions and do life fun.